All right. It is 6:30 p.m. on March 2nd, calling our meeting to order. All right. Kick it off with chair remarks. First, want to around COVID-19. I see a lot of the stuff coming out of the CDC, local Board of Health, starting to remove some of the mask mandates and distinct protocols. So maybe, hopefully, sometime soon, we can potentially start meeting in person. Wanted to send out a thank you for posting the press release on the high energy bills and kind of explaining that the pricing that we're seeing. Unfortunately, I think we are seeing some of the worst case scenarios that Sprague laid out to us a couple months ago, maybe even worse than what they had even imagined or envisioned. With the weather being on the colder side and the geopolitical environment, I fear that we'll continue to see volatility and cost pressures in the near future, especially if the global community continues to sanction Russia's energy sector from oil, gas, uranium, technology, infrastructure, and more. Other commissioner reports, I'll go to Phil. I know, Phil, you sent out something as well. If you wanted to read that into the record.
Yeah, I will. I know we're not going to solve the world's problems tonight, but I thought at least I believe it's incumbent on the board to acknowledge the current global political and economic situation as it closely relates to our core energy business. A month ago, we saw promising signs that our 2-year battle with COVID-19 was fading. Spring would emerge, people would begin to gather as normal, the supply chain and economy would rebound, and we'd now battle inflation versus anti-vaxxers. What a difference a month makes. We knew we had a couple more months of winter and it's high energy cost to endure. President Biden opened up the strategic oil reserves when oil hit $85 a barrel to keep gasoline prices lower. The European Union natural gas supply was being squeezed by Russia, and we diverted LNG tankers to help. Then Russia invaded Ukraine. The existential crisis shifts from the effects of rising Earth's temperature to the threat of nuclear war, puts things in a different perspective. Many experts will attempt to predict what's going to happen next to energy supply and cost. We know Germany's pulled the plug on Nord Stream 2. BP and Shell divested in Russian oil. ExxonMobil could be next. None of this is going to be favorable to energy costs in the near future. Global fossil fuel data for 2021 is showing increase of coal for power generation, especially in China and India. Even the United States, coal was increased for the first time in 7 years due to the high cost of natural gas. In spite of all our efforts, the environment is taking a hit. The obvious challenge will be how to keep electric and gas rates as low as possible in this changing environment. I just wanted to state something for the record. As you, Tom, have talked about the geopolitical situation, it'll be high on our thoughts and agenda going forward. So, thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Any other, Jen or Jack?
I'll just say that Green Communities is back up and running, and we're putting that information together now and looking towards, it looks like, an end of April submission. So just want to get that update.
Thank you. That's good news to hear. Town liaison is not present. Moving on to public comments. I see that we have a member of the public. Any public comments?
Not yet.
Okay. Just as a informational for, you do need to be recognized by the chair, state name and address in order to speak during the public meeting.
Do you want me to do that now, Tom?
Sure.
Kathleen Sharp, 69 Pleasant Street, Wakefield.
Thank you. All right. Moving on to the approval of the minutes. We'll start with the January 26th minutes for our strategic meeting. Were there any other updates that are not in the board book that we want to adjust now?
I have none.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to accept the January 26th, 2020 minutes.
I'll move the motion.
Second,
Second.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead, Jen.
seconded by Jen. Commissioner Corsi,
Aye.
Commissioner Calais,
Aye.
myself, I, and Commissioner Walshaw.
Aye.
All right. The motion passes unanimously 4-0. Moving on to the approval of the February 2nd meeting minutes. Any updates to the minutes that were not included in the board book?
I have none.
Nor I.
I have some. Page 12,
Hold on.
there's a header up the top that says COVID.
Yep. Okay.
But this page is talking about also community solar and then like a snow plowing situation at the bottom. I was just wondering whether we could get some headers in there to just delineate those sections where we shift topic.
You'd like to add solar to the second paragraph? Is that the
Yep.
idea?
Yep, and then whatever header is appropriate for the last paragraph where we're talking about the substation plowing, snow plowing. Just because we're shifting topics a couple times in that page.
All right.
And then page 15. It says, Commissioner Calais asked if more was available, how high would we go? This comes after a couple sentences about kind of Hydro-Quebec, but what I was talking about in that sentence was actually wind. So if you don't mind adding offshore wind, if more offshore wind was available, just so people know what I was talking about there. And that's it.
Okay. And Phil, you said you were all set?
Yes.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to accept the February, oh, Jack, did you say something? All right, all right. I will entertain a motion to accept the February 2nd, 2020 minutes as amended.
I'll move the motion.
All right. Second,
Second.
I'll second.
all right. Commissioner Corsi,
Aye.
Commissioner Calais,
Aye.
Commissioner Walshaw,
Aye.
and myself, aye. Motion passes unanimously 4-0. Okay, moving on to old business. Pete, project updates.
Yep, before we get there, Mark and I did an analysis through January of supply costs compared to our neighbors. Right now, through the January month, we were 38% lower than National Grid and Eversource, who cover Stoneham and Melrose on the electric side. And we were only 1.8% higher on gas, which is, relatively speaking, nominal considering, our size versus National Grid. So as that's through January, obviously everybody's supply costs are going up in February because of stuff that Phil and Tom talked about. So we're monitoring that closely and adjusting fuel charges as necessary. But through January, we were still significantly cheaper on electric, and on gas, we were pretty much equal. So that was based on actual bills and comparisons of direct usage on our rates versus the rates of our neighboring utilities. So that's kind of seeing what everybody's experienced, and not just Wakefield. And so I think we'll keep doing what we can to keep it as low as possible. Obviously, the difficult driver is the gas side. So the other item that came up last month was near the end of the meeting, it was asked if we could do a comparison of savings of what we were projecting for carbon savings for the apartments that are going all electric because of the moratorium. So Joe Collins has joined us. He did a little work on the side with Mark to try to do the best we could at an estimated, CCF of gas savings and what that translates to in terms of carbon savings. So I'll give it to Joe for a minute.
So that's on page, if you guys want to flip to page 34, it's this blue slide, or this slide in the blue box.
Give you guys a minute.
Yep, how's it going, Joe?
Good, how are you?
Welcome.
Thank you. So basically it's a preliminary analysis looking at the savings based on the gas moratorium for new family units. So basically I tried to take a look at what a traditional unit of similar size would use if they were with gas heating versus when we put the heat pump in. So I used data from the Energy Information Administration, the most updated residential survey. And through that data, I was able to find that there's about a 59% carbon savings from the gas heating side to the heat pump side. So that's equivalent to 180 passenger vehicles driven for 1 year, or about 2 million miles driven, and also about 93,000 gallons of gasoline consumed, or 81,000 gallons of diesel consumed. So it's kind of just looking at the two and doing a first level projection of how much carbon emissions that we were saving based on those size units.
So one of the things that I think, the apartments that are being built are various sizes, because there's studios, 1 and 2 bedroom units. But we had to, to do the comparison that we were asked for, we kind of had to standardize on some middle ground. So we based it on 1,000 square foot unit. And nationally, the average for heating for a 1,000 square foot apartment unit was about 256 CCF. And we do have some comparison data specifically in Wakefield with the first Foundry Street building, and we marked an analysis of that. And it was consistent with that based on the year we have so far of data on that building.
So the 256, just to be clear, it's EIA energy, it's national data, but it was specific to the Northeast, because I mean, if you look at an apartment, somewhere in the South or something, it's going to be different. But this data was specific from the EIA to the Northeast, and we backed it up. We validated. We kind of went back and forth, and we validated some of the data with actual real. We did some data mining and looked at our customer. I mean, Sylvie can attest to it. She printed out all this stuff for us, and we kind of went back in and we challenged that 256 and the 810 kWh. And that's when we came and we were able to validate that data. It was pretty close. And I mean, some of the units were, like Pete was saying, 800, 900, 1100 square feet, but they all averaged around to about 1,000 square foot, 1,000 square foot unit. And that was a standard. So it's fairly, it's reasonably, we can rely on the data from, because we were able to back it up from, from the EIA. So.
This is great data. It's great to see this as, side by side comparison. It's gives us stuff to, fall back on and rely on and point to, as, the empirical data here.
This is awesome. Sorry.
I just had a follow up with that. And I think it would be great to see, do we have, now that we have like the 256 CCF, can we apply this to, our savings, or how this impacts our gas peaking? And how much, because that, is kind of where the moratorium sprouted out of, is to kind of keep us out of that peak.
So it's more of an avoided, I think, to answer the question.
Or avoidance, yeah.
Yeah, it's an avoided peak. So this was based on these numbers, the 829 metric ton. That was based on 1,000 units, that are planned here in town, between the head of the lake, and various other projects that, Dave has got going on within the next, I don't know, what's the time horizon, a couple, 3 years or something like that?
Right.
Some of them are already there, so yeah.
Okay, so, so that's, 1,000, that number, those numbers are for 1,000 units.
Yeah,
Okay.
so annually it's a savings of basically 256,000 CCF.
Yeah.
And how would that play into the avoidance of our peak? Obviously, if we're avoiding the 256K in the annual peak, there's real world cost savings there, and you've demonstrated the CO2 savings.
Yeah.
But
so on 5, again, weather dependent though. Everything's weather.
I know it's a hard ask.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can ballpark that or not.
Yep. On a 5 million-ish, and we've gone up to 6, but on a 5 million-ish peak, I mean, this would be, 256 would be like roughly 5%, right? Because 500,000 would be 10%. So rough round numbers. So it's a 5% peak savings. If that helps.
Can I jump in and ask a question or two?
Go ahead, Jack.
So we're talking about the heat pump annual increase in electric usage per unit, assuming 1,000 square feet per unit, and it's only 810 kilowatt hours in an entire year. So this is an annual increase over what? Over what they would use if they weren't heating with electricity?
Correct.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, so here's my question. When I look at my bill, and my unit is not 1,000 square feet, it's half of that, if that. I use somewhere around 200 kilowatt hours a month in the summer, and upwards of almost 1,000 kilowatt hours a month in the winter with my electric heat. I don't have heat pumps. I just have the regular old-fashioned baseboard electric heating, but that's 800 kilowatt hours every month, not every year.
So resistance heating, I mean, I don't have the formula on that, but resistance heating is much less efficient.
It's, Jack, from heat pump to resistant heating, you're probably talking in the ballpark, 10 to 20x with on the resistant heat over the heat pump. The heat pumps, that's why heat pumps are so efficient. They don't actually create heat. They just simply move heat from indoor outdoor. And they just, obviously during the winter, they're moving it from from outdoor to indoor, and then reversing that during the summertime, removing the heat from the home and into the outdoors. So
Another big factor in the multis that we've been using is the fact that with current designs and the fact that there is a crossover benefit when you're in a unit with 86 units, like the Foundry Street one's going to be, there's crossover benefit from your neighboring units in terms of, insulation and heating load. So that's another way that these units become more efficient with the newer building designs.
So you're telling me that I got to get rid of my resistance heating and put in some sort of heat pump system, because it'll cost me 1/10 the price monthly afterwards. All right, I'll do some research.
And we'll give you a rebate for it too, Jack.
Yeah.
wait,
We have an
Yeah.
Jack, don't
incentive.
forget we have the consulting service as well.
And our board will help.
All right.
All right. I super appreciate this, Joe and team. This is great data.
Can I actually ask one other question before we close? Did you assume a declining grid emissions trend over time, or is this just for kind of like 2022 as the grid emissions are today?
This is would be real time as of the data available today, because this is from the EIA. So it's today's.
Yeah, so over the lifetime, this would be actually much higher, assuming that grid emissions are going to be going down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, cool.
So it's magnified, in other words, as we go out into the out years. Yeah.
All right. Back to you, Pete, for
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure we had to. Going back to the general manager report, I think, a lot of the work that we do in the winter is weather dependent. We throw in a couple of major snowstorms and it slows some things down, but overall, the year has started off okay. On the gas side, we're converting as many services as we can. They've already checked off 97 of the meters out of basically 900 this year that we have to do. Typically, we'll do a little over 1,000 because we'll bring in some from a future year. And if there's any new load or adjustments, especially where we're doing conversions on streets, we'll change meters so that every meter on the street becomes, the same year in as many cases as possible. So getting back to what was mentioned with COVID, the town has eliminated the mask mandate inside the public buildings. So we have gone along with that. We still do have protection up in the front lobby. We have extra plexiglass for customers that do come in. And we still do make masks available and for both our front counter help and for any customers that come in if they choose to wear a mask or need to wear a mask. And we did have, I think it was 5 cases of Omicron between the end, between Christmas and the end of, it was basically over by the middle of February. So we had 5 cases spread out. It was kind of 2 at a time over a few weeks. But none of it impacted business. We were able to isolate. 3 out of the 5 were caught with the Monday morning testing that we were doing with the rapid tests that were provided by the town. We caught 3 out of the 5 cases that way. So that was very effective. The solar project, Dave could talk about it a little bit, but we are meeting. We do have to meet with the ZBA over the roof issue. We included some drawings and some renderings that we're going to be taken to the ZBA on March 23rd. We're also going to take that opportunity to discuss a little bit about some of the other issues we're facing with zoning in terms of placement of transformers and the fact that many of these buildings are being pushed closer to the street to maximize building space, but at the same time, it presents electrical issues because in many cases, we're bringing them too close to the overhead wires. So we just are going to remind the ZBA of those issues. And then we also want to talk a little bit more about solar readiness and EV readiness at that meeting as well, putting that on their radar screen.
was And I think I realized that that was two different things. You're advising the ZBA around some of the
Yeah, issues. that-
proposals that are coming to them, where, developers and residents are asking for variances, and they're getting too close to the wires and things. And asking
Right at
for-
the end of Water and Wakefield Ave is a perfect example.
I saw that. Are we also getting support? I would imagine that the fire department also has issues with that, with ladders, ladder trucks, with access and safety for our first responders.
Both fire and
Yep.
the town building / electric department.
That was brought to their attention as well when we've talked to them about previous projects. So that they're aware of that too.
Okay. And do we, and circling back to our solar project, I know we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting. We didn't anticipate any issues with our project going forward. Is that still the case?
We're hopeful of that. I think the renderings would show you that there's absolutely no visibility from North Ave. So again, the concerns they had when we originally built the building were around aesthetics, and there's no aesthetic change on the North Ave side, and there's limited visual impact to the 4 properties that are behind the building. I think we included some examples of that in the package. So the whole idea of the meeting was to show the impact, and again, the impact is minimal. So I do believe that they shouldn't have an issue with this.
I appreciate that. When is that meeting scheduled for? And in terms of the solar readiness and the EV readiness, do you need any support from the board, or would like any?
So the meeting's March 23rd.
And that's just to start the discussion with the ZBA, Tom.
Okay.
It's not a decision making. It's not, it's
Yeah,
just more of a, the
information.
light department is just asked if we could talk to them about those topics that Pete mentioned. The one that is a formal part of the meeting is on the solar project. That was more formal, and we had to meet timelines to make sure that gets published and abutters get notified.
Any questions, comments from any of the commissioners before moving on to the next?
And none.
All right.
I think and I don't know if there's any other questions on the dashboards or the projects. I think we already talked a little bit about the winter gas and electric supply. Again, through January, we showed our comparison. I think we're in good shape through January, February. We're watching the impacts of the pricing, regularly, so that we don't get ourselves in trouble. But the other utilities are in the same boat. Everybody's moving their cost of fuel charges up. So, but through January, we were equal or better than the IOUs. So.
Thank you.
And we'll keep this on here for the next 2 months at least. A couple months ago, I mentioned the winter months are considered November through April, but the real drivers of our cost are really December 15th through March 15th. So keeping our fingers crossed that we're closing in on the worst of the heating season that truly drives our cost. I think the one thing that we'll have to be mindful of this year is that typically the costs drop way off in April. And with the global situation, that may not be the case this time. The natural gas prices might not drop off in the shoulder months like they typically do. So we'll have to be mindful of that. We'll be obviously talking to Sprague. We talk to Sprague regularly about where the prices are, and we'll watch for that. Usually, again, we can drop our cost of CCF down pretty precipitously starting in April, and this year that's probably not going to be the case. just because of the geopolitical environment, that I don't think the prices are going to come off as quickly.
Thank you.
We included a preliminary, typically we do the results of the year at the February meeting, but we had the strategic planning stuff like a week before that, so it was kind of tight. So we did include some results here. We haven't actually established the committee for this year to review 21 and create 20 and do the goals for 22. So I think the most important thing is we included some results in here, but we're probably not ready to talk about the year-end stuff unless you really want to. But typically what's happened is we've created the subcommittee. We've met, we've talked about it, then the subcommittee and we report back. But I wanted to at least start that process by bringing some of that to the forefront. And also if there's any more backup data that you're gonna need. With Elton not here tonight, I figure we could do the presentation and executive session that we talk about the year-end stuff in the next meeting. But in the meantime, I just want to bring it, get it on your radar screen about maybe creating the subcommittee for the review of 21 and the establishment of the 22 goals.
Thanks.
I mean, I would be willing to volunteer to serve on a subcommittee if needed. I did go through the goals in the book and I matched them up against the mid-year update that we did in, I think it was November. And it looks like there won't be a lot of work updating and evaluating the 2021 goals. It looks like we gathered much of the information in November.
I just had a data request under providing customer service, education, and outreach. It says that 3 sessions were held with customers, and if you can just add the names of this, what the sessions were about, or just a little bit more information on that and when they were.
Yeah, it's actually, they're all taped on our website.
Oh, great. But I mean, just for documentation in this particular forum, that's all.
Yep. We have all our customer information seminars on the smart energy portion of the webpage. So in February, we had the launch of the commercial program. In May, we had the contractors lunch on the heat pumps, and then we had a customer heat pump 101 later in May. So we did 3 earlier in the year.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
One other thing in that regard that's coming up, we typically do the farmers markets when those roll out. Representative Lipper Garabedian approached us about participating in a Green Day recycling event that is being coordinated through her office with the town. And we were asked if we could have a table there, and we, obviously much like we do with the farmers market. And also we're looking into the possibility of helping support a dehumidifier recycling program. They're doing that portion of it in Melrose. So Representative Garabedian is doing 2, one in Melrose and one in Wakefield. And we're trying to mimic, if we can, the work that they're doing on the dehumidifier recycling in so we had a meeting yesterday with National Grid, who serves in the representative's office, and National Grid's going to get us some more information on who they use and how they do the dehumidifier recycling. We'll see to the extent that we can support that effort.
Great. Just circling back to the performance. Thanks, Phil, for volunteering for the subcommittee. Is there any other commissioner that wants to be part of that. I forget who did it last year. Was it? I know.
Yeah.
Bill.
Jen and I.
Okay. Go ahead, Phil.
Hearing no volunteers, I mean, I went through it, and I think Pete did a good job of updating the book, and I think we could get through this in executive session.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't.
To do that.
I would.
Without meeting as a subcommittee.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that, glaring that was missing. Normally the subcommittee already, goes through this and updates this. Pete, thanks for putting all this together already. Yeah.
I mean, I did the subcommittee last year, so I certainly want to give anyone else a chance, but I'm happy to do it again this year.
Do you and Phil just want to meet real quick, and then we just put this on an executive session for next month, and go through it and vote when we have Elton back?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, I think the bulk of the work, oftentimes more of the work is in developing the next year's goals. Because as you mentioned, Pete does a very good job of populating this against the previous year's goals.
All right, why don't we do that? I guess are there any commissioners have any goals at the top of their head that they want to have included, or think about it and just email Jen and Phil thoughts and suggestions and ideas so that they can incorporate it for next year.
Yeah, just be careful about emailing, one commissioner emailing to two other commissioners. That would violate the open meeting law.
Right. I mean, if anyone has ideas, it'd be good to have them on the table now, although it certainly doesn't preclude you from bringing them to the next meeting.
Okay.
My one big interest area this year is to do more marketing of kind of all of our existing efforts. Last year was kind of a big website update year, and I think, we can see that there's been a lot of really good work to bring the website along, and I think we're in a much better place. So my thinking there would be to essentially replace a lot of that content with more marketing focused content and make that kind of one of the big efforts this year. But I'm interested in other people's thoughts on that.
Jen, I agree with you. Just, anecdotally, I see, just today on a community post that there doesn't seem to be, even for residents, new and old, that they're aware of a lot of the efforts that we've done in the past couple of years. So just getting the word out. There's still a lot of just stale mindset and data out there that, we don't have an energy efficiency program. We don't do a lot of these things when in fact that we do. So just having that, I think that's a good goal. I know it's been on.
I completely agree with that.
Thanks, Jack. I would also I know it's been on, and it's, for the past couple of years, and we haven't had a lot of movement, but I would like to see us, bring forth at least just plans or feasibility around, residential and commercial battery for, whether coupled with solar or not solar, for dispatch, and potentially incorporating that. It's kind of the same concept of the vehicle to grid as well. So I think we kind of have to start looking at those things.
Are we looking at doing the 2021 performance at next month's meeting, and maybe the 2022 goals, at least the meeting after that? Yeah,
or we could do both. We could do the kind of goals for 2022, you know, in regular meeting session, and then, you know, move into executive session to review the 2021. If we want
Well, I
to.
guess we'll get back to you and tell you how we're doing, and we'll have some interface with Peter on the 2022 goals.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to at least minimum get through the 2021 in an executive session next month, so that, you know, that can be done and buttoned up for Pete and team.
Yeah, I'd like to see us shoot for trying to get the 2022 goals in place next month too. I don't like to see it all the way until May before we even set the annual goals.
All right,
Understood.
put both of those on the agenda for April.
Mhm.
Any other discussion on this before?
No. The other thing I'm going to include next month is I'm going to start the senior staff report outs with Vinny and Paul Redmond again on the electric side, just our, you know, an update on our global plans for, it's kind of the 1 to 3 year snapshot, kind of like what they did last year, where we were and where we're headed, you know, from the system side. And then the month after that, we'll do gas, and then we'll start to layer in the senior staff presentations throughout the year as we did last year.
Great. I really enjoy those and appreciate those. So I think those are a great addition. I had two things real quick. Was the first one was on the EV DC Fast grant. Do we already have site ready plans, or is that something we still need to work through citing that?
We have to work with the town. We did have a preliminary site that was filed. We talked about one site which was across the lake on Main Street in parallel parking, and I think we talked about it when we first filed the grant, that they wouldn't accept that. They didn't want parallel parking. So we identified a site closer to the road, that Quantipower Parkway, like right off that, and
yeah.
That generically was approved as the site, but we have to talk to the town more specifically about an exact location right there.
Okay, great. And then has there been, and I know we're starting to get real short on runway, the solar grant that the town has for the DPW water department? Have they made, I know the update from Joe at the ESC meeting was that it was in the works, but there wasn't any specifics. I don't know how far we're at, and I know that money expires at the end of June.
So I talked to Joe, and he selected a vendor, and all he has to do is submit the application through us. So I've talked to him about that, and the vendor's familiar with it because they've done it before. Actually, the same vendor that did the other building.
Okay.
So yeah, so we're not holding anything up on our side. It's really, he's already selected it. He already had me review the estimate, the quote, and everything looked good. I told him it would be fine, and they just need to go through the application submitted to us, but I don't see any barriers at all.
Okay, great. That's great news.
And like the last one, we'll assist with project management on that to make sure it's done.
And
Appreciate
that's
it.
going to go on the other water department building?
That's where they're gonna put it, yeah.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Item number 2, under new business, the ESC town meeting proposals. More on me. The ESC did approve to sponsor the EV Ready Code and the Solar Ready Code as town meeting warrant articles. So we're crafting those. Jen had asked this to be on our agenda, and it's, I think, more specifically around the Solar Ready and our, you know, from a utilities perspective, the infrastructure. Are we ready for kind of more solar coming online? Are there any challenges, any concerns from the utility side? And Jen, if there's anything that I missed in that you want to amend?
Yeah, so one of the potential clauses on the solar side in particular, and actually it's related to EVs as well, is making a requirement that at the time the building is built, that essentially a certain proportion of either, if it's the lot on the EV side or the roof or roof space, is developed. And looking at the Watertown model language, that language stated that a minimum of 50% of roof space and 90% of, like, essentially parking lot canopies would be covered with solar upon the building being built. And so that would, for large buildings, you know, could be pretty substantial in the near term. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were ready for that kind of development, you know, solar and EV development, if that were to go into these codes. And specifically, well, so I think, Pete, you can speak to, I think the three things I was asking about is, first of all, on the distribution side, you know, are there any concerns there from a technical or engineering perspective? The other thing was, you know, incentives, just clarifying, you know, what we're doing with that. And the third element was looking at our net metering rate and yeah, deciding if for that scale, potential scale of solar, how we want to kind of address that moving forward.
So Jen and I chatted offline, and I think from a system perspective, obviously we can't speak specifically about distribution impacts without knowing exactly where the building's going. But last month we presented from a system overall perspective, we're in very good shape in terms of being prepared for the increased EV load and intertie with solar at a global level. I think, you know, again, that doesn't speak to the fact that if it's in a certain location, there may be distribution upgrades that are required to accommodate that. So we'll, you know, and we deal with that. Dave and Vinny deal with that on a case-by-case basis every day right now. So that's, you know, that's the stuff we would do. So, you know, if there's significant impacts to adding solar, we would prepare a cost estimate for the developer, and that would be included in their cost to interconnect. You know, we prepare those estimates all the time. So that's from the technical side. From the incentive side, we do not at this time provide new construction rebates, and we don't pay developers to do the stuff that's required of them. So I think, you know, I would still say that, you know, we have our incentives for our, you know, residential customers today. My opinion is we don't need to incent a developer to do, if this passes and becomes a requirement in Wakefield, we don't need to incent them to do what's required. And then net metering, I think we can constantly look at that. I still think that the rate that we pay rises and falls with our cost of electricity. They get 85% of the cost of electricity. I do think that, you know, we do need to monitor like the impact on our distribution charge, you know, but again, keeping this focused on new development does limit the impact to some extent, because it's only on new growth, not on existing conversions, where we're going to actually lose rate base.
So the things I wanted to consider, I guess, on the net metering side is that constructs that kind of tie to rates are not really tied necessarily to the cost of solar. And so solar costs are projected, and obviously we're having some supply chain issues right now across the board that are not reflecting cost decrease, but solar is projected to continue to decline in cost over time, which could result in us overpaying for that resource. So I just wanted to put it out there that we may at some point want to change that construct. We certainly want to probably revisit it on an annual basis to make sure that the credit that we're giving is appropriate given the solar costs and whatnot. So I just wanted to say that we should keep track of it And my concern definitely is that those solar costs could diverge quite a bit from our rising, what we probably will be, so, you know, a slow rise in our costs from a rate perspective.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, all good discussion points. Any other comments or discussions on this? And I think we were fairly, you know, prior to this, comfortable and confident in terms of the distribution infrastructure being ready, you know, obviously on the case by case, but good to just make sure that we're ahead of any of those things. All right. Any other updates or comments from the commissioners? And then any other matters not anticipated by myself before moving into executive session?
Got a couple here. The May meeting, if I'm doing my calendar right, it's showing the board meeting on Wednesday, the 4th. At the same time, the MWIC conference is going to be held on the 4th and the 5th.
Oh, that's right.
And do we want to consider moving the board meeting to the following Wednesday, the 11th? How do we want to handle that?
Let me double check that. Is it, are they listing it as Wednesday, Thursday? It used to be always on Thursday, Friday, but they might have, it might be Wednesday, Thursday this year.
I have it on my calendar as Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
And if it's too early, we can look at it again next month.
Yeah, I'll double check. I think it is that. I'll confirm it before we do, and then maybe I'll just send it on an email. If it is on that Wednesday, are people okay with moving our board meeting out 1 week to the?
I have no issue with that. So so I guess if the MWIC meeting falls on the 4th, we can just proactively move the May meeting to the 11th. Anyone else have any conflict?
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Next one, I have a question for Tom. You were in Portugal. You happened to take in delivery on one of those 4,000 exotic cars that were put on a ship that sunk off the coast of Portugal, were you?
No, I was not. That actually was on fire before I even left.
It just sank the other day, though. They said it finally. They were towing it back to port and it sank.
Yeah, there was rumblings that it may be the batteries from the electric vehicle that started the fire. So here we go. So a quick insurance company calculation, 4,000 vehicles at 75,000 a pop is 300 million. I don't know how much the ship is worth. So could be looking at $1 billion in the bottom of the ocean.
Ugh.
I heard there was also a contingent of Bentleys on the ship as well. So I think that cost goes up a little bit.
Well, and Lamborghinis and
Yeah.
but one guy wrote in his wife's Porsche Macan, and he
Oh.
called the dealer and they said, yeah, it's gone. We've already ordered you another one. So
I'll wait for the I don't even know if it's who investigates that, whoever where the source of the fire was. They'll
Yeah.
ever.
well,
We
the
already
insurance
canceled our
company-
order for the WMGLD electric Lamborghini.
Oh, all right.
And the only one I had, I was just gonna check in on Kathleen. Have we bored you to death yet? Oh, she's on mute.
I'm there. Speak.
We're just checking on you to see if we've completely bored you to tears yet.
Oh, no, I'm hard to bore.
Okay.
No, I've never attended one of these meetings. I'm curious to see what you talk about. I have an interest in the peaker plant. So you'll hear from me again. But it's, I just want to know how this gets done. And I have to say, it's always nice when a meeting is a Zoom meeting because you can see everybody clearly. But as a citizen of Wakefield, a payer, a taxpayer, I'm interested in how this group does things. Because I have a concern about when we talk about electricity overtaking the direct use of gas, whether we're still considering where that electricity comes from now and where it will come from in the future, and how we're really calculating how that will work. Because I find just in the kind of popular mind, people often talk about electrifying things as if that electricity came from, I don't know, Mars. So I'm interested in seeing how you make your way through the very complex issues involved in continuing to provide power in a town. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Just a comment on that. In our monthly board book, which is published on the webpage, and I can share this, I think, right? I have share permissions. Screen two.
I've spent quite a bit of time looking at your webpage.
Okay, so yeah, under About Us, is this sharing?
Yes.
Yep.
Nicely.
So we publish every month as part of the board book is what our portfolio mix looks like for.
I see that.
So if you're ever curious where that power comes from, we put it out there for you.
So on average in 2020, we were 43% non-carbon emitting. Last year, we were 48% non-carbon emitting. This year, we project surpassing the 2030 goal and being about 51% non-carbon emitting. So we are already exceeding the 2030 goal, hopefully this year. At least that's the path we're on right now. And we're far exceeding the investor-owned utilities whose goal has not reached that point yet.
I was impressed with the amount of data available on the site.
Thank you. Pete, that goes to you and team. All right. We are, next up is moving into executive session. So
you're tossing me out?
We will have to, but thank you.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. Let's see.
So I have to stop recording and then start recording again.
Yeah, let's do the stop recording after we take the vote.
Okay.
Jack, you're
So
gonna say
I'll make a motion.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'll make a motion that we come out of the general session and go into executive session specifically to discuss the customer issue and the collective bargaining situation. And then that we come back out of executive session solely for the purpose of adjournment.
I'll second that.
All right. Commissioner Corsi,
Aye.
Commissioner Clay,
Aye.
Commissioner Walshaw,
Aye.
myself, aye. All right, let's stop the recording.